A desperate escape. The vast expanse of space stretched out before Lyra's ship, a tapestry of stars that once represented hope and unity. Now those same stars seemed to mock her as she fled from everything she had ever known. The sleek silver craft shuddered beneath her six-fingered hands, its systems pushed beyond their limits in her desperate bid for freedom. Lyra's luminescent skin, usually a calming shade of blue, now pulsed with an agitated purple hue. Her large, almond-shaped eyes darted between the ship's controls and the rear sensors, searching for any sign of pursuit. She was Azurian, a species known throughout the galaxy for their diplomatic prowess and technological achievements. But now she was nothing more than a fugitive, branded a traitor by the very people she had sworn to serve. The events of the past solar cycle replayed in her mind, a nightmare she couldn't wake from. She had been so close to brokering a lasting peace between her people and the aggressive Vorn Empire. Years of careful negotiation, of building trust and finding common ground, had led to this moment. The treaty was ready, the delegates assembled, and then, in an instant, it all fell apart. The explosion that rocked the Great Hall was devastating, claiming the lives of key figures from both sides. In the chaos that followed, Lyra found herself framed for the attack. Evidence materialized out of nowhere, damning her with a precision that spoke of long-laid plans. Her mentor, High Counselor Jen, had looked at her with such disappointment, such convincing shock, that for a moment Lyra had doubted her own innocence. But she knew the truth. This was no accident, no act of terrorism. This was a deliberate sabotage of the peace process, orchestrated by those who stood to profit from continued conflict. And Lyra, with her dedication to diplomacy and her growing influence, had become a threat that needed to be eliminated. A proximity alert jolted her from her thoughts. A patrolling Azurian cruiser had picked up her trail. Lyra's heart raced as she pushed her small ship to its limits, diving into an asteroid field in a risky attempt to lose her pursuers. The ship bucked and weaved, scraping past chunks of space rock that could easily tear the hull apart. "Come on," Lyra muttered, her melodic voice tense with concentration. "Just a little further." As if in response to her plea, a surge of energy from the overtaxed engines propelled her deeper into the field. The pursuing cruiser, too large to navigate the treacherous terrain, fell back. Lyra allowed herself a moment of relief, but she knew it was only temporary. They would find another way around, and her head start was measured in minutes, not hours. Consulting her nav system, Lyra plotted a course for the nearest inhabitable planet. It was a risk. She knew nothing about this world or its inhabitants, but with her fuel reserves critically low and her options dwindling, she had no choice. The planet grew larger in her view screen, a swirling orb of blue and green that reminded her painfully of home. As she breached the atmosphere, warnings blared throughout the cockpit. The ship, already pushed beyond its limits, was failing. Lyra fought for control as the ground rushed up to meet her. With a bone-jarring impact, the ship plowed into a field, carving a deep furrow in the earth before coming to rest at the edge of a dense forest. Smoke billowed from the ruined engines as Lyra, dazed but alive, struggled to free herself from the wreckage. She stumbled away from the crash site, her vision blurring as the adrenaline began to fade. The air was thick and rich, almost too heavy for her Azurian lungs. Unfamiliar sounds surrounded her, the rustle of vegetation, the calls of alien creatures. Lyra pushed forward, knowing that to stay near the ship was to invite capture or worse. As she reached the tree line, a new sound cut through the alien chorus. Voices. Lyra froze, her chromatophores instinctively shifting to match the mottled bark of a nearby tree. Through the foliage, she caught glimpses of bipedal figures approaching the crash site. They were similar in form to Azurians, but their skin was a range of browns and pinks, without the bioluminescent qualities of her own people. One of the figures, taller than the rest, moved with a confident stride that spoke of authority. "Spread out," he called, his voice deep and resonant. "Check for survivors, but be careful. We don't know what we're dealing with here." Lyra watched as the group fanned out, their movements cautious but purposeful. They wore simple clothing, a far cry from the sleek uniforms of Azurian security forces. In their hands, they carried tools, and what appeared to be primitive projectile weapons. Lyra's scientific mind, even in this moment of crisis, couldn't help but analyze and categorize what she was seeing. These were not the advanced beings she had expected to find on a world capable of supporting life. They seemed primitive, at least technologically. And yet there was something in their demeanor, a quiet competence and adaptability, that intrigued her. As one of the searchers drew near her hiding spot, Lyra knew she had to make a choice. She could remain hidden, hoping they would leave without finding her. But with her ship destroyed and no knowledge of this world, her chances of survival alone were slim. Or she could reveal herself, risking capture, but also opening the possibility of aid. In that moment, as she teetered on the edge of decision, Lyra felt the weight of her diplomatic training. First contact situations were delicate, often shaping the course of interspecies relations for generations. Despite her current circumstances, she was still an Azurian diplomat. She had a duty to approach this encounter with openness and respect. Taking a deep breath, Lyra stepped out from behind the tree. Her sudden appearance startled the nearby searcher, a younger male with curious green eyes. He let out a surprised shout, raising his weapon instinctively. "Please," Lyra said, raising her hands in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peace. Her translator, a small device embedded near her vocal cords, worked to convert her words into the local language. "I mean you no harm. I am in need of assistance." The young man's eyes widened, taking in her alien appearance, the blue skin now fading to a nervous green. The large eyes, the delicate tendrils that framed her face in place of hair. But to Lyra's surprise and relief, the initial shock quickly gave way to something else. Wonder. "Holy shit," he breathed, lowering his weapon. You're real. You're actually real." The rest of the search party was converging on their position now. Drawn by the commotion, Lyra stood her ground, fighting the urge to flee as she was surrounded by these strange, fascinating creatures. The tall man she had noticed earlier pushed to the front of the group, his expression a mix of caution and awe. "I am Lyra," she said, her voice steady despite her racing hearts. "I come in peace, seeking sanctuary. My ship is destroyed, and I am far from home." The tall man studied her for a long moment, his brown eyes intense but not unkind. Then, slowly, he extended his hand, a gesture Lyra recognized from her xenological studies as a greeting among some species. "I'm Jack," he said, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Welcome to Earth, Lyra. Looks like you could use a friend." As Lyra reached out to take his hand, she felt a glimmer of hope spark in her chest. She was still in danger, still a fugitive with a galaxy's worth of problems on her shoulders. But in that moment, with the warmth of the alien sun on her skin and the curious, friendly faces of these humans around her, Lyra allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had found a safe harbor in the storm. Little did she know that this encounter would not only change her fate, but also set in motion events that would reshape the future of both their species. The adventure, it seemed, was only just beginning. Unlikely allies. The human settlement sprawled before Lyra, a patchwork of sturdy buildings and cultivated fields that spoke of resilience in the face of an alien world. As Jack led her through the busy streets, Lyra couldn't help but marvel at the ingenuity on display. These humans, with their limited technology, had carved out a thriving community on the fringes of gnome space. "Welcome to New Haven," Jack said, his voice tinged with pride. "It's not much compared to where you're from, I'm sure, but it's home." Lyra's translator struggled with some of the local idioms, but she grasped the sentiment. "It is impressive," she replied, her luminescent skin shifting to a warm orange of appreciation. "Your people have accomplished much with limited resources." Jack chuckled, a sound that Lyra found oddly pleasing. "That's humans for you," Give us a problem, and we'll find a way to solve it, even if it means using duct tape and wishful thinking. As they walked, Lyra noticed the stares and whispers that followed them. Some humans looked afraid, others curious, and a few seemed outright hostile. Jack must have sensed her unease. "Don't mind them," he said softly. "Most folks here have never seen an alien before. Hell, until you showed up, half of us weren't even sure aliens existed." They arrived at a squat building with a red cross painted on the door. "This is our medical center," Jack explained. "Let's get you checked out." That crash looked pretty rough. Inside, Lyra was introduced to Dr. Emily Chen, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. As Emily examined her, Lyra marveled at the primitive but effective medical equipment. "Well," Emily said after a thorough examination, "your physiology is unlike anything I've ever seen. But as far as I can tell, you're in remarkably good shape considering what you've been through. A few bruises, some minor lacerations, but nothing serious." Lyra nodded, grateful for the care. "Thank you, Doctor. Your skills are impressive, especially given your unfamiliarity with my species." Emily smiled. "Medicine is about observation and adaptation. Speaking of which, that color-changing skin of yours is fascinating. Is it linked to your emotional state?" Before Lyra could answer, the door burst open. A group of men entered, led by a gruff-looking individual with a scared face. "Jack," he barked, "what the hell were you thinking, bringing it here?" Jack stepped between Lyra and the newcomers. "Easy, Commander Harris. She's not a threat. She needs our help." Harris snorted. "Help? Do you have any idea what kind of danger you've put us in? For all we know, there's an alien invasion fleet on its way right now." Lyra felt her skin shift to a deep blue of sadness and fear. She stood, her voice steady despite her trepidation. "I assure you, Commander, I am alone. I am a fugitive, seeking asylum from my own people. I mean you no harm." Harris's eyes narrowed. "A likely story. Jack, I want it confined until we can figure out what to do." "Her," Jack said firmly. "Not it. Her name is Lyra, and she's under my protection." The tension in the room was palpable. Lyra marveled at Jack's willingness to stand up for her, a complete stranger. It was a level of compassion she hadn't expected from such a supposedly primitive species. Finally, Harris relented. "Fine, but she's your responsibility, Jack. If anything happens, it's on your head." As Harris and his men left, Lyra turned to Jack. "Thank you," she said softly, "but I do not wish to cause trouble for you or your people. Perhaps it would be best if I left." Jack shook his head. "No way. You're in no shape to be wandering around on your own. Besides, where would you go? No, you're staying right here where we can keep you safe." Emily chimed in. "He's right, Lyra. You need rest and time to recover. And frankly, I have about 1,000,000 questions about your species that I'm dying to ask." Lyra felt a warmth spreading through her, her skin taking on a soft pink hue of gratitude and growing affection. These humans, despite their fears and limitations, were showing her a kindness she hadn't expected. Over the next few days, Lyra began to integrate into the daily life of New Haven. She spent hours with Emily, exchanging knowledge about their respective species' biology and medical practices. To her surprise, she found the humans' approach to medicine often ingenious, making up for their technological limitations with creativity and determination. Jack took it upon himself to be her guide and protector. He showed her around the settlement, explaining their farming techniques, their improvised power systems, and their community structure. Lyra was fascinated by the humans' adaptability and their strong sense of community. As they walked through a field of strange plants one afternoon, Lyra finally felt comfortable enough to share her story. She told Jack about the peace negotiations, the betrayal, and her desperate flight across the galaxy. Jack listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. When she finished, he let out a low whistle. "That's one hell of a story, Lyra." Sounds like you've got some powerful enemies. Lyra nodded, her skin darkening to a deep purple of worry. Yes, and I fear I have put your people in danger by coming here. The ones who framed me. They will not stop until I am silenced. Jack's face hardened with determination. Well, they'll have to go through us first. We may not have fancy spaceships or advanced weapons, but we humans are pretty good at standing our ground when we need to. His words touched Lyra deeply. You would risk so much for me. Why? Jack smiled, a gentle expression that made Lyra's heart flutter in an unfamiliar way. Because it's the right thing to do. And because, well, I think you're pretty amazing, Lyra. The way you've handled all this, how quickly you've adapted to our world. You're something special. Lyra felt her skin flush with a bright pink, a reaction she couldn't quite control. These new emotions were confusing, but not unpleasant. Their moment was interrupted by a sudden commotion from the center of the settlement. They rushed back to find a crowd gathered around a malfunctioning communications array. The colony's lifeline to Earth was sputtering and on the verge of failure. If we lose that link, we're cut off, Jack explained, his voice tense. No way to call for help or supplies. Lyra studied the primitive device, her mind racing. I might be able to help, she said hesitantly. My people's technology is more advanced. If you'll allow me, I could try to modify your system. The crowd murmured uneasily, but Jack spoke up. Let her try. We've got nothing to lose. With careful movements, Lyra approached the array. Using bits of scrap and tools borrowed from the humans, she began to work. Her fingers moved with precision, applying principles of Azurian technology to the human device. Hours passed, the tension mounting as Lyra worked tirelessly. Finally, with a burst of static and a flicker of lights, the array hummed to life. The signal was stronger than ever, the connection to Earth crystal clear. A cheer went up from the crowd. Jack beamed at Lyra, his eyes shining with admiration. You did it. That was incredible. Commander Harris pushed through the crowd, his expression a mix of grudging respect and lingering suspicion. Well done, he said gruffly. Looks like you might be useful after all. Lyra's skin glowed with a warm golden light of pride and happiness. For the first time since her desperate flight began, she felt a sense of belonging. These humans, with their strange ways and remarkable spirits, were becoming more than just allies. They were becoming friends. As the celebration continued around them, Jack pulled Lyra aside. Listen, he said, his voice low and serious. I've been thinking about your situation. We might not have spaceships, but we do have a global communications network. If your enemies are really part of some big galactic conspiracy, maybe we can help you expose them. Lyra's eyes widened. You would do that? But the risk? Jack grinned, a spark of adventure in his eyes. Hey, where's the fun without a little risk? Besides, sounds like the fate of the galaxy might be at stake. Can't let you have all the hero moments, can we? As Lyra looked into Jack's determined face, she felt a surge of hope. Perhaps here, on this remote human colony, she had found not just sanctuary, but the key to unraveling the conspiracy that threatened everything she held dear. With the modified communications array humming behind them and the warm acceptance of the New Haven community surrounding her, Lyra realized that her desperate escape had led her to something she never expected. A chance at justice, and perhaps even more surprisingly, a chance at love. The adventure was far from over. In fact, as Lyra and Jack began to plan their next moves, she realized it was only just beginning. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, but with these remarkable humans by her side, Lyra felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The hunt begins. The following weeks saw New Haven transform from a quiet colonial outpost to a hub of clandestine activity. Lyra, Jack, and a small team of trusted humans worked tirelessly, using the enhanced communications array to piece together the fragments of the galactic conspiracy. Lyra stood before a makeshift holographic display, her bioluminescent skin pulsing with concentration as she explained the latest findings to the group. The peace treaty's sabotage was just the beginning, she said, her melodious voice tinged with urgency. I've intercepted transmissions suggesting a far-reaching plan to destabilize multiple sectors of the galaxy. Jack leaned forward, his brow furrowed. But why? What's the end game here? Emily, who had become an integral part of their team, spoke up. Follow the money, right? Whoever's behind this must stand to profit from widespread conflict. Lyra nodded, her skin shifting to a thoughtful blue. Precisely. And I believe I know who's at the center of it all. The Vorn Syndicate. A murmur ran through the room. The Vorn, a secretive and brutal species, were known throughout the galaxy as arms dealers and mercenaries. If they were involved, the situation was even more dire than they'd initially thought. Commander Harris, who had grudgingly come to accept Lyra's presence, growled. So what's our next move? We're not exactly equipped to take on an intergalactic crime syndicate. Lyra's skin flickered with determination. We need proof, irrefutable evidence of their involvement. There's a Vorn outpost on a nearby moon. If we can infiltrate it, we might find the data we need. Jack stood, a glint of adventure in his eyes. Well, what are we waiting for? Let's start planning our heist. As the group dispersed to prepare, Lyra felt a gentle touch on her arm. She turned to find Jack looking at her with concern. Hey, he said softly, you okay? You've been pushing yourself pretty hard. Lyra's skin warmed to a soft pink, a reaction she was beginning to associate with Jack's presence. I'm fine, she assured him. It's just the weight of it all. So much depends on us succeeding. Jack's hand found hers, his warm fingers intertwining with her slender blue ones. We're in this together, Lyra. You're not alone anymore. Their moment was interrupted by a sudden alarm blaring through the settlement. Commander Harris's voice crackled over the comm system. Unidentified ship entering atmosphere. All hands to battle stations. Lyra's hearts raced as she and Jack sprinted towards the command center. Through the view screen, they watched a sleek, predatory craft descend from the clouds. Its design was unmistakable. Azurian. They'd found me, Lyra whispered, her skin paling to a sickly gray. Jack's jaw set with determination. Well, they're not taking you without a fight. As the Azurian ship touched down outside the settlement's perimeter, New Haven's Ractic Defense Force mobilized. Farmers and colonists stood shoulder to shoulder, armed with whatever weapons they could muster. The ship's hatch opened, and a tall, regal Azurian stepped out. Lyra gasped, recognizing the figure immediately. Jen, she breathed. My former mentor. High Counselor Jen surveyed the human defenders with disdain. His voice, amplified by some unseen technology, boomed across the battlefield. Inhabitants of this world, we come in peace. We seek only to apprehend a dangerous fugitive, the traitor known as Lyra. Hand her over, and we will leave your settlement unharmed. Jack stepped forward, his voice clear and defiant. Lyra is under our protection. We know the truth about your so-called peace treaty. You'll have to go through all of us to get to her. Jen's expression hardened. So be it. You primitives have no idea of the forces you're dealing with. What happened next would be talked about in New Haven for generations to come. As Jen's troops advanced, the humans sprang into action. What they lacked in technology, they more than made up for in ingenuity and sheer determination. Emily and her medical team had weaponized local plant spores, creating a debilitating but non-lethal fog that confused and disoriented the Azurian soldiers. The farmers used their knowledge of the terrain to lure enemies into natural traps. Even the children played their part, using slingshots to pelt the invaders with small, sticky fruits that gummed up their advanced weaponry. In the midst of the chaos, Lyra found herself face to face with Jen. Her former mentor's eyes blazed with a mixture of anger and something else. Was it fear? Why, Jen? Lyra demanded, her voice cracking with emotion. Why betray everything we stood for? Jen's composure slipped for a moment. You don't understand, Lyra. The Vorn, they have leverage over all of us. This war, it's inevitable. I'm just trying to ensure our people come out on top. By sacrificing innocence, by throwing away everything we've worked for. Lyra's skin pulsed with righteous anger. There's always another way. These humans have shown me that. As they argued, Jack and a small team had managed to board the Azurian ship. Using the skills Lyra had taught them, they accessed its computer systems, downloading crucial data about the conspiracy. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the battlefield. One of the Azurian energy weapons had overloaded, creating a shockwave that knocked both defenders and attackers off their feet. In the confusion, Gent made a break for his ship, only to find it already commandeered by the humans. Surrounded and outmaneuvered, he had no choice but to surrender. As the dust settled, Lyra looked around in amazement. Against all odds, the humans had prevailed. Their unconventional tactics and unwavering spirit had overcome superior technology and training. Jack emerged from the captured ship, a data drive clutched triumphantly in his hand. "We got it," he announced, grinning despite his injuries. "Everything we need to expose the conspiracy." Lyra felt a surge of emotions, relief, pride, and something deeper she wasn't quite ready to name. Her skin glowed with a brilliant, joyous light as she embraced Jack. Commander Harris approached, looking battered but satisfied. "Well," he said gruffly, "I guess we're officially part of your galactic intrigue now. What's our next move?" Lyra straightened, her eyes shining with purpose. "We take this evidence to the Galactic Council, with proof of the Vorn Syndicate's involvement, and Jen's confession. We can finally expose the truth." As the humans of New Haven began the process of securing their Azurian prisoners and tending to the wounded, Lyra felt a profound sense of belonging. These remarkable beings, with their indomitable spirit and capacity for kindness, had become more than allies. They were her family now. Jack came to stand beside her, his hand finding hers once again. "You know," he said with a wry smile, "when I signed up for this colony, I didn't exactly expect to end up in the middle of an intergalactic conspiracy." Lyra's skin rippled with amusement. "Are you regretting it?" Jack's eyes met hers, filled with warmth and something that made Lyra's heart skip a beat. Not for a second. As they stood together, watching the sun set on a day that had changed everything, Lyra knew that their journey was far from over. The road ahead would be dangerous, filled with challenges they could scarcely imagine. But with Jack and the humans of New Haven by her side, she felt ready to face whatever the galaxy might throw at them. The hunt for justice had only just begun, and Lyra couldn't help but feel that the greatest adventures, both for the galaxy and for her heart, still lay ahead. Turning the tides. The stolen Azurian ship hummed with tension as it cut through the vast emptiness of space. Lyra stood at the helm, her slender blue fingers dancing across the alien controls with practiced ease. Beside her, Jack watched in fascination, still marveling at the advanced technology that surrounded them. "You're sure this plan of yours will work?" Jack asked, his voice a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Lyra's skin rippled with a pattern that Jack had come to recognize as determination. "It has to," she replied. "The data we acquired from Jen's ship points to a massive Vorn stronghold in the Cygnus sector. If we can infiltrate it, we'll have all the evidence we need to expose their conspiracy to the Galactic Council." The small team they had assembled for this mission was an unlikely mix of species and skills. Emily, the colony's doctor, had insisted on coming along, her medical expertise deemed crucial for the dangerous task ahead. Commander Harris, despite his initial mistrust of Lyra, had volunteered his tactical knowledge. And perhaps most surprisingly, a chastened Jen had offered his help, claiming a desire to make amends for his role in the conspiracy. As they approached the Cygnus sector, the ship's sensors began to light up with warnings. "Multiple vessels detected," Jen announced, his voice tense. "Vorn battlecruisers. They've spotted us." Jack's hand instinctively went to the makeshift weapon at his hip, a fusion of human ingenuity and Azurian tech. So much for the element of surprise. Lyra's mind raced, her diplomatic training kicking in. "Wait," she said, an idea forming. "Jen, send out a distress signal. Make it look like we're a damaged Azurian scout ship." As Jen complied, the team held their breath. Moments later, a gruff voice crackled over the comm system. "Azurian vessel, state your business in foreign space." Jen, falling easily back into his role as a high-ranking official, responded with convincing authority. "This is High Counselor Jen of the Azurian Diplomatic Corps. We've suffered severe damage and request emergency docking for repairs." There was a long pause before the Vorn responded. "Proceed to docking bay 17. Any deviation from your assigned course will be met with lethal force." As they maneuvered towards the massive Vorn station, Jack whispered to Lyra, "I can't believe that worked." Lyra's skin flickered with a mix of relief and anxiety. "It's only the beginning. The real challenge lies ahead." The moment they docked, the team sprang into action. Using a combination of Azurian cloaking technology and human design jammers, they managed to slip past the initial security checkpoints. The interior of the Vorn stronghold was a maze of dark, angular corridors that seemed to shift and change as they moved. "We need to find their central data hub," Lyra explained as they crept through the shadows. "It should contain all the evidence we need of their involvement in galactic destabilization." As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a Vorn patrol. The aliens were massive, their bodies covered in thick, armored plates with multiple arms, each wielding a deadly energy weapon. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, with a speed that belied their size, the Vorn opened fire. What followed was a chaotic dance of light and shadow. Jack and Harris, drawing on their military training, provided covering fire with their hybrid weapons. Emily, proving herself far more than just a doctor, used her knowledge of xenobiology to target weak points in the Vorn armor. Lyra and Jen, their bodies glowing with bioluminescent patterns, used their natural Azurian abilities to disorient and confuse the enemy. Their skin flashed with hypnotic rhythms, momentarily stunning the Vorn and allowing the team to gain the upper hand. As the last Vorn fell, Jen turned to Lyra, his eyes wide with a newfound respect. I had forgotten what it was like to fight for something greater than ourselves," he admitted. Lyra's skin pulsed with a warm, forgiving light. "It's not too late to remember, old friend." Their moment of reconciliation was cut short as alarms began to blare throughout the station. "They know we're here," Harris growled. "We need to move. Fast." Racing against time, the team fought their way deeper into the heart of the Vorn stronghold. Every step was a battle, every corridor a potential death trap. But with each challenge, the unlikely allies found new ways to combine their strengths. Jack's quick thinking and adaptability complemented Lyra's advanced knowledge. Emily's medical skills kept them going when injury threatened to slow them down. Harris's tactical mind found paths where none seemed to exist. And Jen, driven by a desire for redemption, pushed himself to limits he never knew he had. Finally, they'd reached the central data hub, a massive chamber filled with pulsing, organic-looking computer terminals. As Vorn reinforcements pounded at the sealed doors, Lyra and Jack worked feverishly to download the incriminating data. "There's too much," Lyra said, her voice strained. "We'll never get it all before they break through." Jack's eyes lit up with an idea. "We don't need to download it. We just need to broadcast it." Working together, they repurposed the Vorn's own communication array, bypassing security protocols with a combination of Azurian finesse and human improvisation. Just as the doors began to give way, they activated the signal. Across the galaxy, on countless worlds and space stations, the truth of the Vorn conspiracy was laid bare. Evidence of their warmongering, their manipulation of galactic politics, their profiteering from conflict. All of it streamed to every corner of known space. As the Vorn troops finally burst into the room, They found themselves facing not just a small team of infiltrators, but the combined outrage of an entire galaxy. The tables had turned. In exposing the Vorn's crimes, Lyra and her team had ignited a spark of unity among the galaxy's diverse species. Reports began to flood in of Vorn ships being detained, of corrupt officials being arrested, of peace talks resuming with renewed vigor. The conspiracy that had threatened to tear the galaxy apart had instead become the catalyst for unprecedented cooperation. In the midst of the chaos, as galactic peacekeepers arrived to secure the Vorn stronghold, Lyra found herself standing next to Jack. Their eyes met, and in that moment, all the unspoken feelings between them seemed to crystallize. "We did it," Jack said softly, his hand finding hers. Lyra's skin glowed with a brilliant, joyous light. "No," she replied, her voice full of emotion. "We did it. All of us together." As they watched their unlikely team, human, Azurian, and even a reformed Vorn who had chosen to help them in the final hour, Lyra realized that they had achieved something far greater than exposing a conspiracy. They had shown the galaxy that when diverse beings come together, when they choose understanding over fear, cooperation over conflict, anything is possible. The battle was won, but Lyra knew that the real work was just beginning. Rebuilding trust, fostering peace, creating a galaxy where all species could thrive together. It would be the challenge of a lifetime. But as she looked at Jack, at Emily and Harris and Jen, at the unity they had forged in the face of overwhelming odds, she felt ready to face that challenge. The tides had turned, and a new dawn was breaking across the galaxy. Whatever came next, they would face it together. A new dawn. The grand halls of the Galactic Council hummed with an energy unlike anything Lyra had ever experienced. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the chamber, their diverse forms a testament to the vastness and variety of life in the universe. At the center of it all stood Lyra and her unlikely team of human allies, their presence a symbol of the unprecedented change sweeping through galactic society. As Lyra stepped forward to address the assembly, she felt Jack's reassuring presence beside her. His steady gaze gave her strength, reminding her of everything they had been through together. "Esteemed members of the council," Lyra began, her melodious voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "We stand at a crossroads. The conspiracy we uncovered threatened to plunge our galaxy into endless war. But in exposing it, we have been given a rare opportunity, a chance to forge a new path, one of unity and mutual understanding." She gestured to her human companions. These beings, whom many considered primitive, displayed courage, ingenuity, and compassion beyond measure. They remind us that true strength lies not in advanced technology or military might, but in the bonds we form with one another. As Lyra spoke, holographic displays came to life around the chamber, showing footage from their adventures. Humans and Azurians fighting side by side, Emily tending to wounded Vorn, Jen risking everything to right his wrongs. The images were a powerful testament to the potential for cooperation across species barriers. "We propose a new initiative," Lyra continued, her skin glowing with passionate conviction. "A galactic exchange program, where members of all species can live and work together, learning from one another's strengths and overcoming our differences." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices, some supportive, others skeptical. But as the debate raged, it became clear that a fundamental shift had occurred. The old animosities and prejudices were giving way to a new spirit of curiosity and openness. In the days that followed, decisions were made that would reshape the face of galactic politics. The Vorn, their conspiracy exposed, faced justice. But rather than seek vengeance, the Council, inspired by the example set by Lyra and her team, chose a path of rehabilitation. Vorn society would be guided towards peaceful industry, their skills redirected towards construction and innovation rather than destruction. Jen, fully redeemed in the eyes of his people, was appointed as the first ambassador to Earth, tasked with fostering relations between humans and the wider galactic community. The data recovered from the Vorn stronghold led to the dismantling of numerous shadow organizations and the exposure of corrupt officials across multiple worlds. But perhaps the most profound change was happening on a smaller, more personal scale. As news of their adventures spread, countless beings across the galaxy were inspired to reach out across species lines to forge new friendships and alliances. Months after the council meeting, Lyra found herself back on New Haven, the human colony that had become her second home. The settlement had transformed, becoming a shining example of interspecies cooperation. Azurian technology merged seamlessly with human ingenuity, creating a thriving community that drew visitors from across the galaxy. As she walked through the bustling streets, Lyra marveled at the changes. Azurian crystal spires rose alongside sturdy human buildings. In the fields, human farmers worked alongside Vorn agronomists, developing new crops that could thrive on multiple worlds. Emily's medical center had become a hub of xenobiological research, with healers from dozens of species sharing knowledge and techniques. Lyra's reminiscence was interrupted by a familiar voice. "Credit for your thoughts," Jack said, falling into step beside her. Lyra's skin rippled with warm affection. "I was just thinking about how far we've come," she replied. "When I crashed on this world, I thought I had lost everything. I never imagined I would gain so much." Jack's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "You know," he said with a grin, "I always dreamed of exploring the stars. I just never thought I'd fall in love with one." Lyra's skin flushed with a brilliant, joyous pink. The depth of her feelings for Jack still amazed her, a connection that transcended the boundaries of species and culture. As they walked, they passed the colony's new spaceport. A sleek ship was preparing for launch, filled with the first group of human explorers setting out to experience life on other worlds. Among them, Lyra recognized the young man who had first discovered her after her crash landing, his eyes now filled with the same wonder she had once seen in Jack's. "It's really happening, isn't it?" Jack mused. "We're part of something bigger now. The whole galaxy is opening up to us." Lyra nodded, her expression thoughtful. "And yet, there's still so much we don't know. Beyond the edges of charted space, who knows what wonders or challenges await us?" Jack squeezed her hand. "Whatever's out there, we'll face it together. Not just you and me, but all of us, humans, Azurians, Vorn, and whoever else we meet along the way." As the sun set over New Haven, painting the sky in hues that reminded Lyra of distant nebulae, she felt a profound sense of peace. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with potential dangers and unimaginable discoveries. But she knew that together, united in their diversity, they could overcome any obstacle. The conspiracy that had threatened to tear the galaxy apart had instead become the catalyst for a new era of cooperation and understanding. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth, that love, compassion, and the willingness to see the best in one another could transcend any boundary, be it of species, culture, or the vast distances between stars. As Lyra looked up at the first stars appearing in the twilight sky, she felt a sense of limitless possibility. This wasn't an ending, she realized. It was a beginning. The dawn of a new age for the galaxy and for herself. With Jack by her side, and the spirit of unity they had fostered spreading across the cosmos, Lyra knew that the greatest adventures still lay ahead. Whatever challenges the universe might hold, they would face them together, stronger in their diversity, united in their shared hope for the future. The stars beckoned, and arm in arm, Lyra and Jack stepped forward to meet them, ready to write the next chapter in their ever-unfolding cosmic story.